Hey everyone, hope you're having a good weekend. Today we're going to be learning about the properties, so let's get started. The commutative property. Okay, this property a good way to remember it is the word commute. And what it means to commute is when you live somewhere but you work somewhere else. For instance, you could live in Lincoln but work in Bellevue. So you'd have to commute. You'd have to go from Lincoln to Bellevue, and then at the end of the day you'd have to go from Bellevue back to Lincoln. Okay, so what this looks like with addition is if you have A plus B, that equals the same thing as B plus A. So home to work and then work back to home would be the commutative property. Okay, with numbers it would look 2 plus 3 is the same thing as 3 plus 2. So that's the commutative property of addition. Same thing with multiplication. Okay, the commutative property would be A times B is the same thing as B times A. Okay? The associative property, this is like how you associate yourself. Okay, what I like to think of is I might have a friend who is friends with someone else, and then I might be friends with someone else. For instance, let me just show you. If you have A, so me, plus, let's say 2 other people are friends and they associate. Okay, and then you have me plus B, we associate, and then there's C. Okay, so when you think of the associative property, you can think of there's different ways that people associate. Doesn't mean that A has to be with C. Okay, it's just different ways of adding, and it's the same thing. So multiplying, so A times B times C is the same thing as taking A times B and then times C. Okay, so that's the associative property. So you have the commutative property, which is like home to work and work to home, and then you have the associative property, which has the parentheses. It's how they associate, so it's different groups of people. Okay, then you have the identity property. Identity means yourself. Okay, so what you want when you're getting out should be the same thing as what you put into it. So the multiplicative identity property, so if I take A, you gotta think, what can I multiply with A to keep it A? Well, 1. So anything times 1 is itself. So that's what we call the multiplicative identity property, because whenever you multiply by 1, you get the same thing back. Then you have the additive identity property. What can you add to A so it doesn't change? Well, you can always add 0 and it's still going to be A. Okay, so for the multiplicative identity property, you can multiply anything by 1 and get itself. The additive, you can add 0 to anything and still get itself. So whenever you see it start with something and it end with that same thing, that's the identity property. And the last one we're going to talk about is the multiplicative property of 0, meaning when you multiply by 0. Well, we know that if you take anything times 0, you're going to get 0. And that's what you call the multiplicative property of 0. Alright, so hopefully you can get those memorized. I'd rewatch them, maybe take some notes. So that way when you come on Monday, you're ready to go. See you Monday.